we're old enough, with the exception of the young man at the far end of the table, but there used to be a show on TV called Happy Days. And there was an episode where... What?
We all watched Happy Days.
Oh, I've seen a Weezer video.
A little there's an episode where little Richie missed a free throw in a basketball game and probably cost the team the game. And his dad gave him a lifesaver at the end of the...
Didn't they have commercials like that too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do remember those.
Well, yeah, it was a parody on the commercial. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Where the like unwrap one and flick it off. Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Wow, well, they changed the interface. Okay, we're live and recording.
Hey, good evening. It is the 15th of September, 2021, 6:30 p.m. This is the Finance Committee meeting. Tim Ghost is absent. May we have a roll call?
Joe St. John.
Here.
Damon Capel.
Here.
Greg Elliott.
Here.
Tim Ghost is absent. Martin Fisher.
Here.
David Martin.
Here.
Cindy Cooper. Here. Six present.
We did have a meeting on August 18th, 2021. There are minutes to be approved, and the minutes are in the packet.
I'll make a motion on those minutes.
Motion by Cindy Cooper to approve the minutes.
Second.
Second by Dame Capel. Discussion? Roll call?
Cindy Cooper.
Yes.
Damon Capel.
Yes.
Joe St. John.
Yes.
Greg Elliott.
Yes.
Martin Fisher.
Yes.
Dave Martin.
Yes.
Chase.
There are a couple of ordinances on here. One is listed on the agenda that relate to finance. Ordinance number 2021.01, third amended appropriations. And can you give maybe that few high level items that need to be addressed as part of the third amended appropriations?
Okay, on the third amended, I was trying to figure out a way that I could do it where you could see it better. If you actually look at the ordinance, it's Fallen Heroes Trail at 125, repair of the Lions building wall at 59,841.
Would you talk into the microphone because the blower is going on the
Tree replacement, 20,000. Hoffman Street storm sewer at 5159. And then now the wastewater fund, the lower Little Walnut Creek Phase 2 at 39.7. Wastewater treatment master plan at 179, and the facilities plan updates at 61.3. So out of general, it's 210, and wastewater is 280.
Okay. So if you go to your council packet, there it's probably 3/4 of the way back. The first page is actually on the back of, if probably 20 pages in, ordinance 2021.01. I'm just going to highlight the items that Mrs. Belcher mentioned. Fallen Heroes Trail 125, repair of the Lion building wall 59,000. Sunbury Mills tree replacement 20,000. Bachman Street storm sewer 5,100. And then the wastewater fund capital line item in by $280,000. Real quick, the ordinance, we can make an amended. It says the words 200,000, but then in parentheses it says 280,000. That's all right.
I'll fix that.
Okay. Little Walnut Creek Phase 2, 39.7, wastewater treatment plan, master plan, 179, and facilities plan updates, 61.3.
We don't have to pass this tonight. We can do a first reading.
If we'll do a first reading, and then I think you and I spoke briefly, and I can't remember who else was there. There may be slight changes to these numbers, within a few $1,000s up or down. By the time it were to be passed, the numbers would be final, and we'd be good.
It just gives us a rough idea.
It gives us an idea, so as we're not passing it tonight, we can ask questions about any of these items. I'd like to start with one question. And are any of these items eligible for reimbursement through grants?
The parks will.
Okay.
Yes, but my understanding is we will have to expend it first and we'll get it back.
If we have a first reading and then we change the numbers, technically, it's not a second reading because it's not the same event. It'd have to be amended by a vote or something, I think. So
I think I understand what you're saying. Could it potentially be along the same lines as you had a first reading and there was a typographical error? And you're saying, we recognize, like, you don't have to start the process over,
that'd be a good question when Mr. Green gets here.
Let me ask a question too. If we say, because we're increasing the general fund by 210,000, and then we're appropriating wastewater fund for 280,000. If we stay within those numbers, would we have to amend it at that point? Right? Like if we took 5,000 away from one and put in the other in the wastewater plant, but we're still going to spend the max of 280, would that matter?
I don't know the answer to that, but
This is the first time I've ever tried to actually spell it out this exact
Yeah.
on an ordinance. So it might be a good question to ask Breen.
Okay.
Normally we'll do.
have a good answer for it. So.
Yeah, what we normally do is we'll increase the appropriations from the general fund by 250,000, and the line items aren't in there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm wondering, if that's what we would do.
I was thinking this might be easier and more understandable if we did it this way. If it doesn't work, I won't do it this way anymore.
Probably the reason you do it is because every time we do one of these, somebody asks, what is this for?
Right, and
And some are in flight, like I'll say like the Sunbury Mills tree replacement. This isn't purchase order worthy. We're still in the RFQ phase. And, some of these numbers are not to exceed. Some are just estimates at this point.
Would it be better if the line items went into the finance committee agenda, but in the council agenda, it just said increase the general fund? That way we know what it's for. We talk about it in finance. And
I
then we
can
can
do
just,
that. I can
yeah.
change this.
I'm just wondering if that would help clear that up.
I can do that. Then I'll make a note on the top of the finance agenda, what it is, and then just kind of clear that out. So I will get rid of that. That was a big thing. I wanted more money.
So at least for now, we're, there's a potential we could do a first reading tonight, an amended ordinance. In other words, removing the detail, leaving the totals in there.
Mhm.
And as things we get more refined throughout the next couple of weeks,
The totals could change.
it doesn't hurt anything if we over appropriate and underspend. It's the opposite is true, is if
Yeah,
we
that's a good point.
overspend and don't appropriate enough, we'll have to come back and do this again. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Government finance.
That's finest.
Good deal. Any other comments on this? Okay, the other two ordinances that are not listed under the finance committee meeting, but definitely fall within scope. There's a first reading on mayor spending limits, first reading on administrator spending limits, and there's also a second reading on elected officials' pay. And they are all in your packet. Does anybody want to discuss any of the items that are in there?
Just what are the limits? What are we proposing the limits to be?
10,000 and 5,000.
Okay.
And that's what it's been for the past. It was basically 10,000, 5,000 from
COVID, right?
May to within the past couple meetings.
Yeah.
Prior to that, 1999 was the last time it changed. No, it's in the ordinance.
Now, does that cover most of the things that you find that you need to authorize spending for right now?
Yeah.
Or should we make it a higher amount to?
I think it covers the majority, right, Steve?
I think so. Yeah, most of the really emergency things that I get will fall within
Under
that 5,000.
Okay.
And it's usually like a critical wastewater part or repair type thing. So,
Storm drain
yeah.
makes a sinkhole in the square. tree needs taken down immediately. Yeah. Any questions on that? Dave, anybody? Okay. And then elected officials pay, any questions on that? Okay. All right, on to the reports. Want me to go through this, Kathy, or would you like to go through it?
No, I don't want to. I prefer you. I mean, it's there, it's self-explanatory. Is there anything that particularly jumps out at anyone that they have questions about? Or do they want to see it in a different way? I tried to print them all. If they're all on OneDrive under finance. Building permits are still down from what I budgeted. But I don't think we've suffered that much from COVID as like, look at the revenue should be at 66.66. We're at 64.87. Local government's at 87.17. And real estate came in at 132 because I underestimated it. I mean, we're the only bad thing that we've got going on that is the interest is not earning what it has in the past, which we knew that because the interest rate you get when you borrow money isn't high, so you're not going to get it when you save it. And the building permits. Is there anything else that you guys have questions about, or do you want to see it in a different format?
I don't, if nobody else says, I just had a couple things I wanted to hit on finance in general, and not really about the funds, but just, I've been doing some research over the past 30 days on, especially as we're becoming a city, I've been getting questions about, how we've been preparing for that. And, we have collective bargaining on the horizon. We have increased road responsibilities, snowplow, street repairs. Just recently, we've been talking about in services, the amount of roadway improvements that we need, especially in the Cherry Street corridor, Miller Drive, Kintner. We've got Sunbury Parkway on the horizon. And I'm going to take a step back from that and just say the past 10 years of population growth, I want to applaud everybody who worked here before me, because Dave Martin, Tommy, Len, Dave Miller, Kathy, Alan, CT, they did an excellent job over the past 10 years. And this is really clear. I looked at the balances in all of our different funds from 2009. And to use round numbers, we've increased our balances in sewer, general fund, and overall by approximately 350% compared to 2009. In relation to our population growth, we've only grown by about 45% or thereabouts. So what I will say is this: you can look at numbers in a bunch of different ways. You've been asked to, over the past 2 or 3 months, invest in some things like big ticket items like boom trucks and roadway improvements because we didn't get grants. But I want to give a lot of credit to the people who came before us, because it's a testament. There's not a lot of other government entities that grow at 40%, but then tenfold financially. And that's through conservative budgeting, that's through prudency, that's trying to go another year without replacing equipment. And so I want to give credit to those who came before us, but I also want to say, and one thing that I've been saying is, we're still playing from behind. I don't think I've realized, and I've come to terms with, I'm never going to feel like great about like the status at where we're at. I can't imagine a metric or something where, like, I feel good living here, don't get me wrong. But in terms of managing everything, I don't feel like, okay, we've got it all figured out. And we can get there. It probably won't happen in my tenure, probably won't happen in your tenure. But the investments that we make, people, infrastructure, parks, communities, connectivity, all these different things, They're going to be painful when we go to have discussions like talking about sidewalk, who's going to do that, who's going to replace trees, whose ownership. These are going to be very painful discussions because it's like, where does the burden really fall? Is it on the municipality or is it on the homeowner or the business? But the short version is this: we're in a really good spot. Again, I'll say it, that thank you to everybody who came before us. Our finances are good relatively, and we want to try to maintain and grow that. All the while we're investing in things that can do more like a generator effect, the magnetic pole where it just keeps on running whether we're here or not. So with that said, to get down to tactics, I think in this year's budget discussions for 2022, we really need to nail down some big ticket items. For the past 2 years, I know parks in particular, we've increased parks funding, but they've also outspent by 300% every year because everybody, and trust me, I'm in the boat. Like, I want to invest in parks, right? But just like any budget line item that you have at your house, you can want to invest in fantasy football teams all you want, or new electronics, new TVs. You can't continue to overspend based on what your budget is, or that 300% gain that's been worked really hard for is going to shrink, and we're going to put other people in bad shape. So all I'm asking is, or I'll be involved in it too, is we try to get a more narrow focus around what the spend is going to be, a more realistic spend, and then not go back to the well so many times for these appropriations, this second, third, fourth readings of appropriations. Along the same lines as infrastructure, we've talked a lot about this. Infrastructure is like our biggest ticket item. I mean, it naturally is. We've got to figure out like what our investment level in infrastructure is going to be. We've always kind of taken the approach, at least since I've been here, is the developer comes in and they're responsible for everything. But there's another school of thought, and I'll just tag a community that's doing it on a rapid scale right now, and that's New Albany. And that's where the municipality invests in the infrastructure on the front end and then puts mechanisms in place to pay for that infrastructure through job growth. And what it allows them to do is kind of free up, different incentives to attract businesses that they want, as opposed to developers coming in and say, hey, we're what you want, and we'll follow your rules, and we'll put our roads in and sewer to meet our needs. So I don't have all the answers on that. I need you guys to be thinking about, what the level of investment we're going to make in roads. And it's kind of like an A/B option. Like, if we get a grant, we're going to invest this much. If we don't get a grant, we're going to invest this much, or just put a cap on it at the end and, underspend. I don't have all the answers. I just wanted to mention this because we are like right on the cusp of budgeting. Steve and Kathy will be very important in those discussions. I'll stop talking.
So are we thinking about increasing our budget year over year? And then if we are, do we have targeted projects, or do you have thoughts, or does anyone on the staff have thoughts about a targeted project that we want to invest in?
If we're increasing the budget, I would more align it with our actual spend from these past 3 years. Naturally, I mean, anybody who's gone through like a corporate finance budgeting process knows there's like a ceiling. You can't go over unless you're going to increase revenue to offset the cost or whatever. We just need to start with kind of, what did we spend this year? Are we expecting to spend the same next year? I mean, we're still growing. Are we going to spend a little bit more than what we spent this year?
So is our budget lower than what we actually spend each year? Like, if our budget is 2 million, are we spending 3?
Based off these appropriations, yeah. This is the 3rd time we've had to amend it.
Yeah. Okay. What is our budget? What was our budget for 21?
5, something like that.
You know where we are year to date?
No,
It's
not the way you want to do it.
yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm just wondering how far off we are.
I will find out.
Okay.
So it seems like identifying what we want to do as priority is one of the first things that we have to do, whether it's make a simple list where you give everything a priority, this goes first, this first, or affinitize it somewhere where we identify what are high cost, high impact, or low cost, high impact, et cetera. Would be, I don't know if that's a working group type of thing.
I think so. But I think the two groups that are going to probably generate that output are going to be the services committee and the parks committee. Parks really have like a fairly narrow focus on what they want to be able to do next year. And when I say narrow, we've got a parks master plan, we've got trail. For the most part, we know what the next couple years are going to look like for trails. I mean, there could be the big one-off Ohio to Erie trail that we connect that, you know, would be an exception to that, but services is going to be a really big one. I mean, not just with the equipment side of it, but laying new pipe, laying new roads. How wide do we want them to be? How do we want people to drive on the streets? Do we want to have a highway through Sunbury, or do we want? I mean, there's a certain amount of throughput you need, but you can also overspend on infrastructure as well by, you know, if it's not driven on, it's still deteriorating. To answer your question, yes, 100% needs assessment, requirement assessment, you know, what do we need? And then back into the cost and start with the top ticket items and work down. I feel like a lot of what we've done is we built on last year's budget, but at least in the past few years that I'm aware of, we've always overspent our budget.
Part of it is the fund. Maybe we didn't overspend overall, but we overspent in sewer fund, or we overspent in parks. Like in parks doesn't have a funding revenue except out of general.
Right.
So in theory, we transfer from general to parks.
Right.
And if I don't transfer enough, it's not there.
Right.
So
I see what you're saying. So it's not that we could be budgeting enough money, we're just not putting it in the right buckets. Is that what you're saying?
yeah.
Yeah.
And if I had transferred 100 into parks, and then we get a reimbursement, on this time, what I decided to do was expend it out of the general, because when the reimbursement comes, I'll put it right back into general, because that's where it came from. So, but even with that, I didn't have it in there.
Here's what this is where the end game is. The end game is, to get to your point, is parks have spent, let's use parks, and we're not picking on parks at all. Let's see
Mr. Gosness is one meeting. And
right,
look what he does.
100,000 a year, 110, 115, 125, like it's just exponentially growing. And then you're like, you get to the point where you're like, we need a rec center.
Yeah.
Okay. That's where you're like, okay, this amount of money is not going to do it. You're not going to have that amount of money you take out of general fund. And then your needs assessment turns into, how much does the community actually want the rec center? How much do they want an amphitheater? And then you back into, what's that going to cost? What are some of the financing terms? Figure all that out. And then, are people going to go on the ballot to say, I want to pay more to have a rec center? But if it's like, man, I'm trying to think of an example. Okay, it's a horrible example, and if my wife listens to it, she'll knock me out. But we don't have a line item to go drink milkshakes, okay? But we spend a ton of money on milkshakes, all right? And like the healthy kind, you know what I'm talking about? So like, we're overspending in our like eating budget because we're spending all this money on milkshakes, and it's like, okay, we gotta like start allocating money, putting money in an envelope
For milkshakes.
for milkshakes, and then, you know, if we have more
Or you invest
leftover,
in a milkshake machine.
yes,
Is one, yes.
yes.
Or you have to invest, make that upfront investment so you're not spending so much on milkshakes.
But the example of a rec center is kind of an off-key balance example, because something that expensive is not just going to come out of our budget. that's an issue that we would have to go on the ballot and have people agree to pay extra money for. Because if we're planning far enough ahead to save up enough money to build a rec center, that means we've been taking money out of people's pockets that we're not entitled to take.
Right. Yeah,
So-
we're not a revenue center.
Yeah.
You're, 100%. That's exactly right. And that's the whole methodology of, purchasing, buying new schools, new school building. If the school had enough money in pocket to pay for the next school, then they're not doing a good job.
Right, exactly.
Spending their funds.
Spending what they're using, so.
So do you want to do what you want to do before it gets too late?
I think we've got
But if you
time
wanted to
address it.
donate a rec center, we'd accept it.
And if we cut out milkshakes, we probably could.
Foundation for the St. John family.
Talk to the CEO of Huntington Bank. Maybe he'll want to donate a rec center.
Well, that's a good point.
Okay, we hear you, Mayor.
Thank you. The needs assessment is very important. We need to take a look at what we spent this past year, what we budgeted.
Baselining is important. We got a baseline, what we're actually spending.
Right.
And then the needs assessment on top of that.
Right.
And then we go from there. I think that's what makes sense.
Do we have any good projections of how our budget is going to change when we become a city? For example, we'll be responsible for Route 36, 37, and 3, surfaces of those as they travel through Sudbury. ODOT has been responsible for those for years. So there are things that are going to become our responsibility that we're not addressing right now. Do we have a ballpark on what that might end up costing us?
Well, we did have the opportunity to speak with someone from ODOT about basic maintenance, when you have their plow down, things like that. And his perspective of that was, it doesn't, I've got people in the habit of keeping their plow down. It doesn't cost me more to keep my plow down. I'll likely keep my plow down. Now, I might turn off my salt machine, but at least I'll keep my plow down. So there'll be some increase that we can project based upon our current road miles and our rate of salt spend that then we can apply to those new sections. Generally, when ODOT does, my experience has been when they resurface state routes, even with cities, they're still picking up 75 or more % of the cost to resurface a state route. Now, they may have it on a 10-year cycle, and we might find that road wears out in 7 years. And so then we're either faced with tolerating a road that needs attention for 2 years until we hit their budget cycle. But unless their funding changes drastically, my experience has been they still step in to some degree and participate on those projects.
Okay.
But yeah, it's hard to project the cost of collective bargaining at this point. I mean, we can make some educated guesses, but that's a process that will work its way through and either be resolved with a mutually agreed contract or a fact finder telling us what is a reasonable resolution of that issue. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think we can put more meat into the budget process, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. Agreed.
And it's a good segue into one of my items.
Yeah.
One of our challenges in budgeting is we get unforeseen opportunities. And oftentimes those opportunities in the form of a trail grant may be that we have to spend the money up front, get reimbursed. We're still putting some money into it, but the lion's share of the money is coming from a funding source. Last month, based on your minutes, we talked about the, what are they calling these things? the Grow Ohio, the Investing in Ohio grants and that process. And you'll have a packet in front of you. It starts with the county engineers rating and priority list of projects. And there's a description in there of the various projects that they reviewed and where Sunbury fell on those. And we have 3 that ended up in the top 10. Whether they'll be funded or not, it's always a question, but that was excellent news. So on Friday, I had 3 task orders communicated to me that I wanted to make you aware of, because again, it's one of these discovered opportunities, but there are costs involved in discovered opportunities. That includes some local share. So the second thing that should be in there is a force main task order from CT. That's for engineering, a lift station and a force main. It's one of our strategic improvements that we need to make in the wastewater plant. There's $191,000 in the local participation to get that project engineered. So we'll be submitting soon with the expectation that we would get $250,000 from these Rebuilding Ohio grant and $191,000 that would be our participation in that particular project. It's for engineering. The task order has a kind of an exit ramp in it, that if we don't get funded through these Rebuilding Ohio funds, that we won't start the engineering of that project. So that was number one. The second one in your packet should be the inspection for the wastewater treatment plant improvements. We've had a number of conversations about those. We're still pursuing an OWDA loan to do that, but this would be a grant if we can get a hold of it. That task order is for the inspection of the project. It's $168,000 that would be borne locally if that one is funded. Obviously, we need to have inspection. It's a question of who does the inspection. And then finally, there's an interceptor sewer phase 2, taking the Little Walnut Creek interceptor that we're currently building and extending it. And again, it's an investment. It's going to open up more land, potential for rooftops and other activity to happen. That one's relatively inexpensive. It's a $39,700 local cost, with the grant bearing $250,000. So I wanted to put those in front of you. I'm not going to go off on my own, and I've got a $5,000 limit. I'm not going to commit almost $400,000 without talking to you about it. So,
2 little chunks at a time.
Yeah, about 80 of them. So, we need to subdivide that task order down into, but time is of the essence with these things. They are, let me see if I get this right. They're at least requiring that we have the task order included in the grant for the design and the build ones. Would they require the task order for the inspection as part of that grant submission?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
If I can embellish, Mr. Mayor, on the presentation. These are the 3 projects that council authorized us to proceed with, or the service committee or your committee. I forget exactly which body, but these are the 3 projects that we were directed to prepare for submission of these applications. The application itself that we submit to the Department of Development requires engineering contracts to be presented as part of the application. We are presenting our master contract that was approved by council through ordinance 2020.03 or whatever it was, which authorizes us to be and act as your village engineer. And in that capacity, within that contract, it stipulates designing, inspecting, and all these other good things. And so then we presented these proposals as the specific work that we would do, the specific scope of work that we would do, and the attending fees. With respect to the inspection fees for the wastewater treatment plant improvement project, you do not bear those. Those are part of the application. They are part of the total cost, and you are committing a 10% of the total cost. So of that 168,000 and change, whatever that number was, your share is 10% of that if the grant is issued. Mr. Piles is correct. Rather than call it an off-ramp, I call it an on-ramp. We set up these proposals that we don't start work until you get your grant or until we're given a notice to proceed to begin the work. And I even put in there that we shall not be compensated for any work that we begin prior to said grant or notification. We wanted it to be very clear. We had no authorization to begin at this time simply by Steve signing it. But we thought that it would serve the purpose of the grant application to have a proposal written and signed off on by Mr. Piles. And I am very sensitive to his concerns for signing things that he may not have the authority to sign. And I'm pleased that he brought it to your attention tonight and for perhaps council's approval through a motion or whatever procedure is needed. And so that's what I wanted to do. And lastly, I wanted to say that this is a first come, first serve program. This is an interesting program. It's a grant. First of all, it's free money. And on the design phase, it's limited to $250,000. And on the construction phase, it's limited to $5 million. The Department of Development, the first words out of their mouth almost literally were, we want shovel-ready projects. Bring us projects you're ready to build. So they're not all that thrilled with our two applications to design stuff. But since it's only $250,000 and since we scored in the top 10 projects for our county, we're pretty excited that we might actually be granted those opportunities. Our wastewater plant, we're asking for $2.4 million, I think. So it's only half of what we're eligible to apply for. That's a shovel-ready project. And so we're pretty excited that we might get in there. The challenge is that if the 250 is already spent by the time we get these applications submitted, there's no money for us. Even if it was a best project that they received, it came in too late, no money left. So we need to move quickly. We've done an awful lot of work in the last 2 weeks to get these applications to where they are. They're ready to go Thursday. If the appropriate permissions and approvals are granted tonight, Thursday. So those are the nuts and bolts of this. It kind of came out of the blue. I know there's a lot of talk about, and as I think Mr. Piles mentioned it, opportunities came that we weren't expecting. Nobody saw this coming, at least not in the circles that I travel in. Maybe the representatives knew it was happening over at the State House, but we certainly didn't. And so it caught a lot of us off guard a little bit. And we're a lot of engineers working late nights to get their clients' projects submitted.
Is the design, I know it's done or almost done for the wastewater treatment plant, is that correct?
That's right.
So would we get reimbursed for that cost of that design then?
No.
Okay. But since the Little Walnut Creek projects are not designed yet, that we would potentially get reimbursed.
Correct, because we're applying for a design loan for a grant for those, whereas we're applying for a construction grant, and you can't. It's not a reimbursement program, so they won't pay you for work you've done already.
Gotcha. So if we get the design grants, is there a chance that they could be out of money and we wouldn't get the construction grants?
There is, and I'll even go so far, and I have no reason to say this, but I think it's likely they'll be out of money by the time we get to that point. But we also have been discussing we have heard that there are whispers in the night that this program may be refunded in 2 years, or a similar program will be rolled out when this one extinguishes. And so we really like the idea of getting these other two projects, or at least one of them, shovel ready. So that if we submit next year and there's no more money for us, if it is refunded, we want to be the first ones in with our, maybe our phase 2 of the trunk sewer, or even the lift station, if we can get that sited and designed and going. So that is our strategy for you. That's we're trying to get you positioned as best as possible to be in the most competitive position when the money is available.
What was the total of the grant again?
250 million for all programs for all 88 counties.
By 88, 3 million per county.
Yeah, but he said it's 5 million per project, right?
Right.
Maximum.
So it could be that 30 counties don't get a project.
Right.
It'd be closer to 2.8 million per county, not three.
Yeah.
Come on, Joe. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
I use round numbers for data.
Yeah. So 200, I don't know, 250 million sounds like a lot of money to me, but it doesn't go very far when you spread it across a state of 13 million people.
Right.
So that's why we're all scrambling to get our applications in.
And these are the 12 prioritized projects?
Yes, for the county.
Do we know the total of this? Do we know the totals?
I believe that the prices are in the descriptions. And at least we were asked to include the price in our descriptions. I don't know if the
I
others
saw
did.
that. I saw ours. I didn't see.
The ones ahead of
Some of
us,
them do.
Ashley is 896,000. Delaware County Regional Sewer, their project's 411. City of Delaware is 200, and then our 2.4 comes rolling in. Those are the
Go big or
projects
go
that are
home.
above us.
It's only 3.6 million of 250 million.
So it isn't allocated by county. It's 250 million total for the state.
For the state.
There's no guarantee that Delaware County will get a penny.
That's true. I also want to say that, I'm not going to quote this, but is this on record? Is this being recorded? I'm just kidding.
Believe it is.
There were not that many projects that were submitted, and I think there were some counties that did not submit.
Any projects?
I think so.
Well, again, they were caught short too and
Right.
had a lot to do in a very short
I mean, I
order.
was kind of impressed that they came out 12. Initial, I heard that there was going to be like 6 or 7 from Delaware County, and maybe half of those were going to be county and us.
That's what I was worried about, was that the county and Delaware would put in some big projects and kind of overbear on the, I was very pleased and with the results that were presented.
Little Walnut Creek Interceptor Phase 2. At some point, I have a visual of this, but at some point we should, unless you have one available, we should show high level, like just blue line where it's going and what it'll serve.
I have an exhibit that's prepared for the application. I'll send it out to you.
Thank you. And just to go, looking back 10 years and saying thank you, the people 10 years out from us would be saying thank you to you. If you didn't, if that goes, it really opens up everything north of Cheshire Road, west of Cheshire Road, 36, 37. And eventually even potentially taking some of the things like Vineyard Church and the Newman facility. I can't remember, high school's kind of right on the border.
The high school needs to go to the west. It needs to come to this sewer.
So the high school would eventually flow this way. It's significant. It's very significant.
It is. It is.
Really proud of the services committee for doing all the work so fast. Nice job, Damon.
So if in council, someone could, by motion, as long as Mr. Breen's comfortable with that, say, Steve, proceed with these task orders, we'll get them signed and in the grants and we'll move along. Understanding that, again, this is one of those where we're gonna have to spend some money to get more money, but,
Can you remind me the last two that would be in design? Until we were to receive the grant or get acknowledgement that we received it, you would not start work?
Correct. We're not touching either of them until you get word on the grant. Unless you decide you want to move forward without the grant. If you get word that you do not get the grant, you may decide that it's to your benefit to move forward with one or both of those projects, especially the sewer.
I did talk to all my peers just within the past couple of seconds, and we do authorize you to work on it. We do not authorize you to pay for us to pay for it. All you want.
You ain't getting a job.
Just joshing. We would.
I don't think you were.
I kept on hearing you say authorize. We will not. We will. Does anybody have any questions about this one? Okay. Everybody probably wants a brief break, but I have to hit on this. We got a space planning study back. I've talked to some of you about this, some of you in more detail than others. We did a space planning study on the municipal building with the intent just to boil it down to figure out how much it's going to cost to get how many more years out of the building. There are some necessary, upgrades. When I say upgrades, it's more like just, structurally reinforcing the floor, making sure the HVAC system works, making sure the generator powers the whole building. Some more basic things than I would say upgrades. It's not like we're getting a tile backsplash or anything. We're, probably going to go down to wood plank floors. Milkshake machine. But we got a good, better, best option. And as opposed to me trying to meet with everybody individually and go through this, I'm going to use round numbers again for Damon. 550, 650, and 850. 550, 650, and 850. These are my calculations only on the years, but I would say it gets us maybe like 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, something like that. There's not a whole lot of science behind that, but we are probably going to run out of usable space, and that's if you include storage, the police department growing. Right now we have boxes on the floor and not in like fireproof storage and things like that. So
we run out of space.
Pardon me?
How quickly do you think we'll run out of space?
We could probably organize it a little better right now and maybe get I don't know. It's hard to say. It'll be pretty soon.
Yeah.
Are you recommending one of those three numbers?
I'm not yet, at least. And so to follow up on this, every person I met with, when I reviewed these numbers, reviewed what the information, the follow-up was, what does a new building cost? Because $850,000 is a lot of money, but how much do we, what if we invest $1 million in a new building? Turns out we wanted to get some comparative analysis. So Greg, myself, the chief of police, the deputy chief, and Steve went to the Genoa Township Fire Department, the police department. It was just recently opened. And I just ask, how much do you think that building cost?
$3 million.
Okay, how much do you think?
I have no idea. I don't know.
It's a good nice building. I'd say probably 3 or 4.
How many square feet is it, sir?
16,000.
Oh, my.
Let's see. Engineers count.
How much do you say, Dave?
6.5 million.
It was 7 million.
Whoa.
And then it was, and even there was about 500 grand in bogeys.
Afterwards, yeah, furniture, AV, they didn't account for in construction cost project. So $7.5 million.
Yeah,
That's what I said.
furnishings are never
We
counted.
went down there and I have tons of pictures and I'm going to put together a little slideshow. They were, first of all, I want to give a lot of thanks to Genoa. I mean, my gosh, the hospitality they showed us,
That was great.
the deputy chief, the sergeants, the chief, up and down, like the officers are very, very proud of that building, rightfully so. And I think the bond passed 70-30 when it did. They took us through the whole administrative process from getting stakeholder buy-in, doing a needs assessment, going out, getting bond rated. It was like a 4-year process for them to go from beginning to we're going to go for this to, moving in.
Yeah.
And they said, man, there was a lot of frustrating times, but it is so nice. And we asked the question, I think Greg even asked it, was how long is this building going to get you? And they said 30 years. And you're like, okay, So that makes sense. And they were initially signed up for a 20-year bond. They were able to get a much better rate. It was going to save $1 million to the taxpayer. So they did it on a 10-year. They got an ultra low interest rate. And they said we're welcome anytime. It was very, very nice. But she knows it. Don't get me wrong. They're a lot bigger than us. But I think you start to see, okay, are we going to do 850 to get 10 or so years, 12 years out of this? Or are we going to really start thinking about a 5-year project where, you know, we've got some undeveloped land, and I don't mean Sunbury necessarily owns it, but we have high demand land along future Sunbury Parkway, along 36, 37. We've got all types of developers coming in and talking to us. It should just be part of the discussion that we're looking at opportunities for land to put a facility on. All the while, that does not solve for the building over here. Right? There's still things that have to be done.
We still have to invest in that space.
Mhm.
We have to.
Round numbers, couple $100,000 probably is what you'd have to do to really, like, you know, if you're going to remove half the people, like police or staff, if you're going to take one or the other and move them at some point, while the hood's up, you know, you may as well change the oil and transmission fluid and filters and all the stuff. So you're talking HVAC work, potentially windows, security vestibule. There's no easy way around this. You guys are right in it. I'm glad you're going to be the people that are with me to walk down this path. And Cindy, thanks for all your recommendations.
It's your fault.
That car analogy came from me.
That's all I've got right now. Second. Motion by Greg Elliott, second by Martin Fisher. Discussion?
Greg Elliott,
Yes.
Martin Fisher,
Yes.
Cindy Cooper. Yes. Dave Martin,
Yes.
Joe St. John.
Yes.
William Capel.
Yes.
Shade.